Hello, and welcome to the Bendigo Tech School. You may have had a little bit of silence there. I'm just had an issue with my mic. Let's see. Is that coming up for you? Yeah, there we go. Okay, so I just had a bit of an issue with my mic. It's all good now. So welcome to the Bendigo Tech School. Today's session is going to be on Photoshop. I'm just going to jump right into it, mainly because we'll probably spend a fair bit of time on Photoshop, I'm guessing, so I don't want to ramble too much. I don't know why I have this background going back and forth. I'm trying to do some advertising for the Bendigo Tech School. That, and I've got to get some screenshots for Steph, so I might as well use that as part of our lesson as well. I need to kind of export some shots out of here, so I'll do that too. I'll do some work while I'm doing a live stream. Isn't that a great idea? All right, so let me just make sure everything is okay. I'm just going to check the technical side of things. Audio's coming through good. I'll just make sure we've got people. We have people. Wonderful. All right, so let's get started. I'm just going to move Photoshop across here now. I was working on my other monitor yesterday, so I've got monitors all over the shop. Let's bring that across there. Just minimize that. Okay, there we go. So ignore all these random pictures of heads. That was from yesterday's session where we were doing character animator. So today's session is all about Photoshop. Now, this is an introduction to Photoshop as part of our Intro to classes. Okay, so we're not going to go really deep into Photoshop. We're just going to be looking at the functions, the user interface, and I think I might focus it on, I was just chatting with Paul probably earlier in the week, I might focus it on, maybe looking at, because obviously this is about schools, but maybe talking about some of maybe your admin offices at schools and people doing things like newsletters and the website and those kind of things, so because we want them to be able to learn these skills as well, so that might really help them out. So I'm going to have a bit of an angle, I guess, on probably more editing photos and layout and changing sizes and those kind of things. I think that'll be a good one, removing people from the backgrounds, cropping, some stuff that you can just find handy and you might be using it as part of your school's newsletter and stuff like that. So that's where I'm going to be looking at this. We've done some more advanced sessions in Photoshop. I believe they'll be in our previous stream, so you can check those out. And probably once we do finish our intro sessions, we might ramp it up a bit and do a more complex session in Photoshop too. So I guess the main thing about Photoshop, it's in the title. For those of you that did our Illustrator intro to class, when was it? Last week now? Very different kind of piece of software. So similar interface, similar functions, but they both handle very different formats. So Photoshop, as it says in the name, is really designed for photos, existing photos, editing images. It's really designed to edit what you have as opposed to create. Now, you can obviously make new stuff in Photoshop, right? You can create paintings and digital paintings and those kind of things. But really, I find its strongest point is editing content you've already got, not creating new stuff, right? For creating new things, I think that's where Illustrator shines because you're using vector-based format to create, logos and photos and those kind of things as well. So a different package and it has different needs. So let's start it up and we'll go from there. So again, I'm using Photoshop 2020. You may be using the older version, so visually the layout could be a little bit different, but basically the functions are the same. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hit on Create New. Obviously, when you start up Photoshop for the first time, you'll see your kind of like a help suggestion here, like it'll show you a bunch of different things that you can do, and then it has your recent files. So I'm just going to go and do Create New. Oops, and that's going to be on the other screen, of course, because I'm running two screens. Let's bring that across here. Okay, so when you start a new Photoshop session, I'm just going to go across here. Recent are the ones that I've used, but you have these, I guess, these document templates across the top here. Okay, and what that's going to do is that's going to lay out the canvas that you're going to work with. So it can be handy to have that setting ready to go, and then you can basically build upon that. So if you know what you're going to be working on, that can be helpful. So first we have photo, obviously, and then you have, if I hit view or presets, you have a range of photo sizes. And what you're looking at here is this bottom part down here. All right. So what you're looking at is the dimensions. So, 3x2, 6x4, they're in inches. That's kind of what the dimensions of photos generally are known as, like, an A4 and stuff like that. But we obviously, if you look over here, we're going to work in centimeters anyway, so it's okay. But what's the key thing here is this PPI. All right, it's going to be really important. So a lot more important here than in Illustrator. So in Illustrator, I said, you know what? You don't need to stress about stuff like resolution because of the vector format. You can scale it up as much as you like. But in Photoshop, you do have to stress about resolution, okay? So it's really important where you're going to go. So you'll notice it's 300 PPI. If you're going to print, again, you'll see 300 PPI here. And then if I do view or presets, you'll see a whole bunch of your different page sizes. So A4 is probably the most common, 210 by 297 in a portrait mode there. But of course, you see you can switch it to landscape quite easily. All right, and you can also turn your artboards on and off. We'll talk about artboards a little bit later. So there's your dimensions there. So again, 300 ppi, art and illustration. Again, if your presets, you can see the size is a little bit different, okay, but still 300 ppi. Now this is where it's going to change a bit. If we go to web, and we go to mobile, you'll notice we still have dimensions, okay, but now we're using web's dimensions. So, 1920 by 1080, a large size web page, 1366 by 768, your standard kind of template for a web page, okay. But you'll notice that PPI has dropped dramatically, okay. So it's gone from 300 PPI in print, and the web's gone down to 72. So let's explain what that is before we move forward. I think that's really important. So what you have over here, if you look to the right, is you have what's called pixels per inch, or you can have per centimeter, but it doesn't have the nice rounded numbers that inch does. So pixels per inch. So what that is saying, if we go back to print, with 300 pixels per inch, in 1 inch of your paper, I guess you could say, there's going to be 300 pixels or 300 dots to make up what is sitting in that inch of paper. All right, so that's a lot of information. But if we go to web, you'll see it drops down to 72. I can increase that to 300 if I want to, but it drops down to 72 by default. So what that is saying is that in 1 inch of, I guess, web real estate, right, like screen space, there's only 72 dots, okay? So it's really dropped down the amount of dots per inch. Now, the reason why that is important is because of where it's getting presented. So with print, you have a huge PPI, so 300 PPI, because it's going to get printed. It's going to be on paper, okay? It's going to be something physical you're going to pick up and have a look at. So the more dots per inch, the clearer and crisper your image is going to be when you print it out, especially if you're going to a printers. You probably won't see 300 PPI if you're just using, an inkjet printer at home, or even if you're using the laserjet printers that you might have at school, you probably won't see 300 PPI. But if you were sending this to a printers, they would really use that resolution. You'll see that on the page. But when it comes to the web, you won't really see that difference. You won't really see much of a difference in that resolution when you're looking at a standard screen. Now, I'm using a 4K screen here, so I have a very high resolution screen, so I probably will see a difference. But most teachers are probably using their, school supplied laptops, which would probably just have a basic, maybe 720p, if you're lucky, 1080p, or if you're Robbie and Graham, a 4K laptop screen. But generally, the laptop screens that you're getting on your school computers are probably 1080p or below. So you're not even going to see that resolution. You're not going to see it on the web and on web pages. So they bring the PPI way down, and that means the file size is a lot smaller, which is important again because it's on the web. If you had a 300 PPI image on the web, it would be, 10 times, maybe more the size of that 72 PPI image. So that means that you're going to have to download more information. You're going to have to see that image on your screen, and then you can't even see that resolution. It's going to have to download a much bigger image. So web page is going to crawl. Everything's going to go slow. So that's why by default, the web is 72 PPI. Okay, so now that I've explained that, that's probably the most important thing you need to know when starting a new document. Okay, if it's something for the web, you might want to do 72 PPI. If it's something for print, you might want to do 300. Now, I'm of the mind that you start higher and you can always work down to a lower size. It's harder to do it the other way. So I would always be doing stuff at 300 PPI. It's going to give me huge file sizes, but if I'm doing something for the web, what I would eventually do is I would save that image out and I would drop that PPI down. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to go into A4 here, and I'm going to create a new document. You can see you've got background here, so you can have a transparent background or a white background to begin with. If I have transparent, it just means there's nothing behind there. I might just do transparent. You have your color, RGB or CMYK. All right, again, by default, just stick with RGB. CMYK would be if you maybe printers would use CMYK, but I'm going to stick with RGB. And again, 8-bit, 16-bit, 32-bit. Your color depth is probably not as important with print, but I'll leave it at 8-bit. So you can leave everything pretty much default. And I'm going to hit create. All right, so there is my blank page. All right, and what I'm going to do here is, because I made it transparent, I'm going to do a new layer. So down the bottom down here, this is really important as well. So Photoshop has your layers. Okay, so we might as well talk about layers straight away. So layers, think of them like layers of kind of transparency paper. Okay, they're clear. If I put them down and I draw on top of one, if I put another layer on top of that, I can see through that top layer the content that's behind it. All right, but if I draw on the top layer and I draw over the bottom layer, I won't see it anymore, but it will still be there. So let me explain that by doing it. I'm just going to go into my paint bucket here, and I'm going to fill up that layer there all in white, and then I'm going to do another layer, And what I'm going to do here with this layer 2, I'm going to go to my paintbrush mode. Hit B. I'm going to change the color. Oops, my panel's over here. Let's bring it across. I'm going to make it red. And I'm just going to bring up my brush size by using the bracket. I'm just going to draw that. All right, so there we go there. Now I'm going to go into layer 3. I'm going to change it to green. And I'm going to draw over here. Okay, so now that I have layers, I can do things like I can turn one layer off and one layer on. Okay, I can change that. Or I can do things like by pressing E and going to the eraser, I can affect only one layer and not the other. Okay, so layers are really important. And I would be working in layers as much as you can. Do as many layers as you can with your work, because it allows you to go back and change things. If that was in one layer, both of those there, and I didn't like the green anymore, it's too late because it's kind of like flattened it and made it one layer. And also with layers, you can do things like you can affect individual layers. So I'm going to go in here and just above, excuse me, just above here, I have some layer properties. All right, so I can do things like I can, excuse me, I can do a color burn, I can do a color dodge, right? I can do, if I go into some other options down here, I can start to change everything that's on that layer. All right, and not affect what's below it. I can also right click and do blending options. Excuse me, I have a bit of cough today. And over here, I have a few options now that I can do for just that layer. So I can do a bevel and emboss, which gives you that kind of 3D kind of depth effect, and I can increase the depth if I want to, and I can decrease it, and I can soften it right off. Okay, I like pillow emboss, that's my fave. So I can do stuff like this. All right, and again, you can see it's only affecting just that top layer. It's not affecting the bottom layer. All right, I can give it a glow, so I might just turn that off. All of these blending options here are non-destructive, so I can turn them on and I can turn them off whenever I want. They don't affect the layer. So, you know, outer glow is a good example. You probably won't see it here. I might change that glow color to a red, and I'll just increase the opacity so you can see it. I'll bring the spread up. All right, it's very hard to see that actually. I should do it on a different layer. But what that's doing is it's kind of giving that outer glow. There you go. So you can kind of see this outer glow to that layer as well. You can bring that opacity down. You can make it larger. Just make the spread come out a bit. So again, it's just affecting that layer. And again, I can kind of turn that off if I want to. And of course, drop shadow, which is probably quite popular. We'll put the drop shadow on. I'll change it to normal. And bring the opacity. Actually, you might not see a drop shadow. There we go. So there's that kind of drop shadow to that layer as well. And again, just affecting that layer. So that's why you want to work with separate layers as much as you can, okay? Because you can start to change and affect those layers as you move along. So there's our layers down there. So we've talked about our pixel size and our layers, all right? Now I might even just do, let me just see if I can show you what I mean by those pixels per inch. So this is my screen at 100%. So this is 100%. This is an A4 page. You can see it doesn't even, it fills up more screen than you can see, all right? So you can see down here, I've got 300 ppi, all right? And that's what it's going to look like. So if I print this, that's what it's going to look like. Now, if I increase this even more, start to zoom in. There we go. So now I'm at, what, 3,200% the size of the image. So now what you're starting to see here is you're starting to see those individual pixels. Okay, so you can imagine there is, you know, your inch down there, and there's 300 pixels in there. So you're starting to see it, but I have to zoom all the way up for you to see it. Okay, so that's what I mean. That's what I mean by those square pixels. I'll zoom in even more. There we go. So there's every individual pixel. So at 300, you can see the size of them. So let's do a little experiment, right? Let's just go new, and I'm going to go into an A4 page as well, but I'll bring it down to 72 ppi, if I can. I might even be able to, actually. There we go. Cool. And there's that exact same thing there. So it's still an A4 page. So if I zoom this back out, all right, let's zoom it out to 100. So it's still an A4 page, okay? But because it's got less pixels per inch, the dimensions are still right. But if I go and draw in this, and then I zoom that back up, let's zoom it back up to what, 32,000 on it. All right, whoa, I'm gonna try and find a sweet spot here. All right, so if I keep zooming it up, you can start to see I have a lot less pixels to work with. All right, so that's why that's important. But from a distance, again, you probably can't see the difference on your laptop screens between these two here. Well, the other thing I might do is, let's take this, I'm going to duplicate this layer and put it on that second. Oh, I'm still working with two screens. There we go. I'm going to duplicate that layer, and I'm going to put it on that new one. Sorry, I've got a very sore ankle. And I'm going to move it around. So there it is there. So you can see the equivalent size. So that is the one I just duplicated. So that's how big it is on that A4 page, because it's 300 ppi compared to that 72 ppi there. Anyway, let's head back. Okay, so that's kind of how pixels are working. Okay, you have a certain amount of pixels per inch, and depending on where it's going and what it's used for, you're going to change those to suit. So again, print, anything you're printing out, be it on paper or a banner or a poster, work at 300 ppi. If it's for the web, you can work at 72 ppi, but personally, I would work at the higher resolution and then export down. So again, I can show you that while I'm talking about it. So if I go to File, Export, and I'm going to export, let's go Save for Web. Okay, and again, it's on the other screen. I'm going to bring this across here so you can see what I'm doing. Okay, so I'm going to zoom this out so you can see it. All right, so I'm zoomed all the way out here. I'm actually at 33%. All right, so what I can do here is you can start to see, there's my image size in pixels. All right, I can start to save this and drop it down in quality if I want to from here. So if we have a look, again, I'll bring this back up now to 100%. There's 100% there. That's in, let's bring it up to maximum. And what this is telling me is this is telling me my file size and how big this is. So at the moment, the original is 33 meg because it's a pretty massive file. All right, but if I drop this down to say high, it's going to tell me the difference in my exporting options. Okay, you see the quality changes down there as well. All right, and I don't know if you can see a difference. Let's see if you can. So what I might do is I'll put it on low, and you might start to see a bit of a difference there. And I'm going to save that. And I'll just save it on the desktop. And then I'll make another one. So now again, I've got to go back to the other screen. Let's replace that. There we go. So what I'll do is, let's go to my desktop. So I'll find it a little bit later. I'll bring those images up in a second, and I'll kind of show you the difference. Let me just bring this across here. Just going to go to my desktop. Let's go to Modified. Untitled. I really don't like the way Windows does its file sorting. I guess it's the least of things to complain about these days. All right, where is my untitled? PQRS untitled. Okay. And there's that image there. So that's saved at low quality. And so you can start to see if I zoom in now, when you start to save an image at a lower resolution and a lower quality, you start to see that distortion there. Okay, so again, you wouldn't want this at print, because then you print this out, you can kind of see all that distortion there. But on the web, if we zoom back out here, you're really not going to see a change. All right, so I think I've done a big enough pixel per inch lesson this morning or today. Okay, so let's move on to actual Photoshop and what we can do. Okay, let's get rid of a few of these things now. So that's our pixel chat. Okay, so let's talk about the layout. I guess is important. So in terms of the layout with Photoshop, in terms of what you're seeing, and this is your workspace. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to rearrange it. And I'm going to reset it to Essentials just in case mine is different. Okay, so just like all the other Adobe packages, you have a workspace which is made up of different items. All right, and you can change the way that workspace looks by going into Window and Workspace. And from here, you get some default workspaces. So if I go into, say, Graphics and Web, there we go there. I start to see my fonts a lot more because we're doing a lot of web and graphics work. I start to see, you know, I've got all these paragraph options down here, my glyphs. So what this is doing is, it's not changing Photoshop, it's not taking or adding things at all, but it is showing you, I guess, relevant information for the work that you're doing. So if you're doing graphics and web, you really want to have a lot of typography up there because you're probably doing that. All right. If we go into Workspace and change it to photography, you can see now it's changed again. Okay. We can see we've got different tools up here. We've now got a lot of the healing tools. Now, again, all those tools are always there, but now what they're doing is they are just front and center. They're easier to access because if you're doing photography, these are the tools you're using most. Okay. If we go back to our workspace, if I do it to painting, so now we're creating something. Again, you can see now we have our colors, we have a whole bunch of different swatches, we have a whole bunch of different media brushes, so different pencils. So if we have a look at pencils and pens, if we scroll down there, you can see all of our different pens that we've got and brushes. All right. So again, it's just changing that workspace to suit the mode you're working in. So what I normally do is I normally have it in what's called Essentials. So I'm just going to go back to Essentials. And this just shows you pretty much the main Photoshop tool that you're going to use most of the time. So that's why we have our essentials down there. So let us start to do a little bit of Photoshop work. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is, what will I do? I will bring up a photo. Let me just jump across. I'm going to jump across here. And I'm going to go, I don't know what to do for photos. I'm going to jump in here and see if I can find a photo. I know I keep saying, you should always make sure you get correct photos and avoid copyrights and all those fun things. So let me see if I can find a photo that, I'll do this one. No, it's a video. I was going to say that would be good. I'm going to try and find a photo that might be interesting. I probably should have prepared this earlier, shouldn't I? Okay, I'm going to take this one. Here's a photo. This is a good enough photo. Alright, I'm just going to download this. Alrighty, and I'm just going to open that in Photoshop. So let me just jump to my downloads. Right click. Open with Photoshop. Alright, there we go. So now I have an image. Okay, so this image, if we have a look, first we can see what this image is made up of. And we can do that in Windows quite easily. I'm just going to go into Properties. Alright, I'm going to bring this across. Let's bring this down here. Alright, let me just bring this across here. So just in case you didn't know. So any image that you've got, this is going to obviously tell us a lot. So you can see, here's my image. So there's the file size. It's only a couple of meg. It's a pretty small image. But what you can do is you can start to see more information on this image. So if I go into my details here, now you can start to see the metadata. This is kind of important. And if you don't know this, I guess it might be an interesting one to learn, especially for your students. So whenever you take a photo, what you're going to find is you get this stuff called metadata put in the photo. So pretty much all your phones, which is what, let's face it, most people are taking photos with, by default, unless you turn it off, that's going to put all the metadata into that photo. Okay, so it's going to have things like where the photo was taken, GPS coordinates, what it was taken with, those kind of things. And I'll show you mine, I don't mind. Or maybe I shouldn't. Should I? Yeah, let's have a look. I'm just seeing what else we've got on here. All right, cool. Yeah, we're okay. So what you can see here is you can see in terms of who took it, I've got the date and the time there of when this photo was taken. All right, I've got the dimensions. This is 3024 by 4032. You can see it's only 72 dpi. So this is an image that's been compressed down from a much higher resolution image. I'll bring up the original high resolution image so you can kind of see the difference. So there's your DPI and your bit depth. But as we scroll down, you can see what phone it was taken on. You can see all those kind of things, the shutter speed, all that fun information. And if we keep on going, you can start to see your GPS coordinates, all right? So you can start to see, obviously, where the photo was taken as well. So something really important to chat about with your students, because they probably don't know, and trust me, they don't, because we've had a conversation with them a few times. They don't know that whenever they take a photo, if they email that photo or they text it, it will send all of that data. So if they take a photo from their house and they text it to somebody in their, and they didn't want them to know where they lived, it's too late. They now know where they live by seeing that metadata quite easily. So you just right click and you can see the metadata. Now, I know iPhones do it by kind of by default. It'll give you a prompt unless you turn it off that says before you kind of text out your image, it'll say this image has location data. Do you want me to remove it? And it will take it away from you. Or you can turn that option off altogether as well. And you can see here in Windows does it as well. It allows me to remove that quite quickly. So they're giving you the choice to do it. But again, none of these things are enabled by default because a lot of people want metadata. It's really important, for them to know where the photo was taken and all the information. But anyway, there's two side rants we've had now, but that one's an important one. Okay, so make sure you chat about metadata with your kids so they understand what's going on. But anyway, let's get out. So let's start working on this photo. All right, so you can see it was a 72 dpi photo, so not a huge resolution. All right, so I wouldn't want this to print, but if I did, so you can start to see as I zoom in, you can start to see that distortion coming through there. You can start to see the individual pixels coming in. If I zoom in there, okay, there are the pixels there. But that's okay. So this is an image for the web, okay? I took it for the web. So let's do a couple of changes. Let's start to use a few tools in Photoshop. So let's go through these tools and what they are. I'm just going to reset my Essentials workspace. Okay, so first up, let's start over here. So here's our Move tool, okay? So you can see here, I'm going to convert that to a normal layout. You can see here, we can move our layers around. So if I had something on top of that, I can move it. Whenever I move it, again, by default, you'll see these pink guidelines. They'll come up. They're going to help you snap it to certain areas. So if I move it close to the top, it'll snap to the top. If I move it close there, it'll snap to the center. And it'll tell me when I'm in the center as well. So they're kind of handy tools to have. So that's our Move tool. Nice and simple. Then here we have our Selection tool. So this allows us to select certain parts of a photo. We can't do anything until we want to do something with that. So I could select the head, for instance, and do Control C, Control V, and then I have another layer of that head. So there's the second layer over there. All right, 2 wrappies are better than 1. Or I could select a certain part of the scene here, and then if I go brush, I'm only working within that selection box. Okay, so your selection allows you to select certain elements in that scene. I'm just going to Control Z and undo all of that. Okay. Now the other thing that's important, if you have a look here, any of the settings here will also have this little kind of down arrow. All right, and what that down arrow is doing is it's telling you that there's more tools under that. So if I hold that down, you can see I've got some different options. I've got a circle, a square. If I hold move down, I've got a different couple options down here as well. All right, and then we have this one here. So this is called a magnetic lasso tool. And what this is going to do is it's going to try and be clever. So let's go over to this box. I'm going to click here. And as I move that across, notice how the selection is trying to snap to elements in that photo. Now this has got a photo that's got bokeh, so it's got like a blurred background. So obviously it's not very clear for it. So let me try something that's a little bit more clear. Let's go over here and we'll use it here. And we can see how it kind of snaps. It tries as best it can to kind of snap to certain elements here. If I slowed that down and did a little better, I'd probably be okay. But that's what that magnetic lasso tool is. It's just trying to kind of select smartly the areas around your image. So again, if I try and do it around here, you can see it's going to try and snap to that color. So that can be handy when you're trying to select certain elements. Okay. And again, if I hold that down, you've got a few other options as well. Lasso tool is kind of like a 3-form version of that. Okay. All right. This is your magic selection tool. So what this is going to try to do is, again, it's going to try and be clever. So if I go here, I'm going to try and find, let's go down to this part of your shirt. And if I click on that, oh, so I'm working on the wrong layer. Let me just get rid of that layer. If I click here, you can see it's trying to select everything that it thinks is the same color. Okay. And you can change that tolerance. If I bring that tolerance to say 50, I don't know why my numlock's not working, so we'll do that again. Let's turn that back on. Whoa, that's not what we wanted to do. Go back. Oh, there we go. Sorry about that. My numlock locked my computer. So I'll change that tolerance to 50. And then you can see it's going to start to grab more information. Okay, so again, this is helpful for selecting. Oops, is that? I'm just. Oh, my screen's gone. It's okay. I'm watching the stream to make sure it's okay. So this will try and select certain things that are the same color, the same shape, and those kind of things. And again, we'll bring that tolerance back to 15. And it'll start to do that. So on a photo, it's not as helpful. Maybe on something like an image that has some solid colors. Okay, that might be a little bit more beneficial. I'm just going to shut the door. Sorry. So yeah, so something that has like solid colors, that'd kind of be more beneficial to be able to select it easily like that. All right, this one here is your crop tool. So pretty easy. It allows you to kind of crop your photo. So we can have it like that. I'll crop my photo there. Okay. And if we go back to my crop tool, you'll notice as soon as you've done that, it actually gets rid of that information. So be very careful when you use your crop tool, okay? Because you're going to delete information from your photo. And same deal, we have more options under there as well. All right, then we have, I won't worry about our frame tool. We don't really need it just yet. Frame tooling is basically like a placeholder. So you can put in a box and then it will kind of create that, well, you can see it in the shortcut there. It kind of creates a masking frame around your images. All right, eyedropper, that's to help you select colors. So if there's a very particular color you want, so let's just say I want to paint in that beautiful shade of green there. If I use my eyedropper, there it is there. So you can see it's kind of selecting all those different colors, and you can see my color bar moving in the right there. And then it'll also tell me, if I double click that, it'll tell me the RGB and CMYK values of that color. So if there's a very particular color I want, I can find it by moving around here. All right, let's get into some actual fun tools. So then we have now the healing tool. Okay, so again, we're talking about photos now. So this is for healing certain parts of your photos, so fixing them up. So let's go straight into the spot healing tool. So pretty easy. It's for fixing spots, right? So let's go. Raf's got one. Right there. All I'm going to do is put the mouse over it and go click. And there he's gone. Spot's gone. And get rid of that. All right. He's got one there. Let's get rid of that one. Gone. Let's get rid of that one. Gone. get rid of his dimples. No one likes dimples. All right, let's get rid of that. Gone. So you can see what it's doing. What the spot healing brush is doing, and it's doing it very fast, is it's basically looking at what you selected, so those spots there, gone, and it's looking at the skin surrounding the spots, and then it's making a quick calculation and going, well, that's the color that's surrounding me, that's the color I need to be, so I will then change that to that color. Okay, so really quick and easy for fixing spots. So again, if I show you that and zoom in, so there's that spot there, and in one click, so go back to my spot healing tool. What's going on here? Sorry, I must have a selection. Oh, there we go. Let me just bring that. So if that ever happens, what was happening then is nothing was working. You notice that I actually had some of that box selected. If you have a selection box or a bounding box around something and you try and do something somewhere else, it doesn't work. And a lot of times what will happen is you'll have this selection box and you'll go and try and paint and you're like, why isn't it working? And it's because you still have a selection box there. It happens to me all the time. So the way to get rid of it is just to go back into selection and do that. So anyway, lesson learned. All right, so we'll go back to that spot and we'll do that. And then, yeah, so what it's doing is it's just very quickly looking at that surrounding skin and matching it. So that's why even the shade and the color is perfect. So it's really cool. Like if we want to move this up, we can, look, it won't work, but I'll try it. Let's just say I wanted to get rid of that button there. I'll try that. Gone. Okay, didn't do as good a job obviously because the shirt has a whole bunch of detail and lines, but that's what it's doing. It's doing a very similar thing. It's just detecting that, looking at the color that's around there and then trying to match it. And that was pretty good actually. You can see it's even followed the lines of that shirt. So the spot healing brush doesn't just have to be for things like, you know, spots. It can be for anything. Okay, you can use it to get rid of, like let's go to this bucket over here, you know, that little bit of mess there, and if I do that, it'll get rid of that too, right? So this is where, like I said, this is a good lesson for people in your school. So not only will they use it for photos and touching up photos, make sure you ask permission first, but you can use it for, you know, cleaning some stuff up. So maybe you've got a school photo of outside, and you saw there's a couple of leaves, or there's some dirt, or there's a Coke can or something lying on the ground, and you want to quickly get that out of the photo. You could sit there and spend a while trying to Photoshop that out, or you could just use a spot healing tool, and it'll do the same thing, right? So again, let's get rid of that dandelion thing over there. Gone. Okay, so don't think you have to do really complex tools and cropping and stuff to clean up items in your scene. The spot healing brush is very powerful and it can do that for you. So most of the time, if I'm fixing up photos and I'm trying to get rid of stuff, I'll just use this because it works, right? If there's a lot of stuff you need to get rid of, if we hold down, we have a healing brush tool. And this is like a paintbrush version of what we're doing there. But what this is going to do is it asks for a reference point. So let's just, oh, this is going to be weird. All right, let's just say I want to get rid of its mouth. All right, which would be sometimes, honestly, would be helpful. What we're going to do is I'm going to use a healing brush. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to press the Alt key and select a reference point. Okay, so I'm going to select this skin here as a reference point. And then I'm going to start to paint. All right, and so what it's doing is it's kind of painting or healing, but using that skin that I had there as a reference point. So the color, the contrast, that's freaky, man. Those kind of things as that reference point. So it gets everything looking pretty spick. All right. So it's kind of trying to make it match in there. Whoops. So you can see I went over the hair. So it kind of brought that in. So again, Alt, choose an area that you want to use as your reference and then start. So you can see there it's starting to paint that shade in. So let's try and fix a little bit of that up. And notice how it even gets the details, like the bumps, right? Like it blends it all in. All right, that's freaky as. Wow. Again, that's not that is not what that is designed for, right? And such a massive image too, you wouldn't use that. But again, you can kind of see the power of how this thing works. So if I wanted to get rid of some grass, or I wanted to match the color of the grass, I can do that as well. I can start to kind of heal it up. I'll increase that. So I can start to kind of paint over that grass using reference points from other parts of my image. All right, so again, this could be helpful. Let's say you have a picture of a beautiful photo of your school and you have that amazing green grass, but you notice there is like a big, missing patch of grass. It doesn't look nice in your photo. So the spot healing tool wouldn't be used for that situation because it's a big area, but the healing brush tool will. So what you would do is you would select some other grass, which looks amazing, like over here, and then you would kind of just basically paint. All right. And then you would, I was too close to the edge there, so that kind of filled in the edge there. But you would just kind of paint and fill over that area. So again, this area up here, like, oh, you know what? I really don't want that in the photo. I'd rather that all be grass. Then I'm just going to use my healing brush. Select some grass and then just paint over it. So I'm basically painting by using a selection point from somewhere else, okay? And so now, and you see, notice how it blends it in, right? So it blends everything in so you don't get those really obvious, like if I zoom out, you don't really get, I should fix that face up. You don't get really obvious kind of distortion there as well. That's terrible. I'm going to bring that back. I shouldn't do that. Let's go and undo that and bring it back to default. All right. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to open that image up again. Cool. I was going to close that down because that's mean. All right. Let's open up that image again. All right, let's get back to it. There we go. Oh, look at that. He's back. He's smiling. Okay, so that's kind of your healing tools. So super powerful. And like I said, you don't just have to use them for healing pimples and those kind of things. You can use them for healing or fixing full parts of your photo. So really, really helpful for when you're trying to get rid of stuff in the environment or in the background, or like I was doing before, just kind of clean up that border over there and kind of clean it in with grass so it has a nice kind of fit in there. All right, they're your healing tools. All right, down here we have our brush tools. Pretty simple. Okay, so if I go into B for brush, I can paint away. And then of course you have a lot of brushes to choose from. So if we go into here, you can see we've got things like our general brushes. So we have this kind of rounded brush, which gives you that nice fall off. You can see that kind of blended fall off over there. Now notice I'm working on the one layer here, which means if I want to get rid of that line, I'm going to actually have to get rid of my photo. Okay, so always remember, I just forgot there, to be working on other layers when you're doing this kind of stuff. Okay, so there's your, it's got a bit of a fall off there. As we go through, you have a whole bunch of different brushes you can use. We have, you know, wet media brushes, and that's things like, you know, you probably can't really see it there, but that's kind of like a water brush. I might just do a new, let me just turn that layer off so you can see it a bit better. That's really pushing my computer. I probably shouldn't have done that. There we go. So you can kind of see I've got this kind of wet media brush. I'll do a white layer so you can see what I'm doing. You'll hear my fan spin up now. There we go. So some of these brush tools are quite resource intensive because this is kind of like, oops, not that one. That wet media brush I was using before. If I go back into this one here. This is kind of simulating that actual that brush. You can see as I move over parts of that image I've already done, it's kind of blending in. That's pretty cool, right? So that's, notice that. Notice how it's kind of blending that layer together. So over here it's just kind of white because that's what I've got. But as I move it over that red line I made, it's actually kind of blending in. It's pretty cool, right? So you do have a fair bit of control in here. So the reason why it's got that pink color, even though I'm using white, is because this brush, part of its properties is to combine other layers behind it. So it's actually acting like real paint, which is very, very cool. But yes, there's a whole bunch of those, okay? A whole bunch of brushes you can use, special effects brushes. All right, I got stacks and you'll probably have stacks as well. And you can also, the good thing with Photoshop is you can also download a whole bunch of brushes. So if there's a certain brush you want to use, you know, you might find that someone already has that brush and they've created it freely that you can use as well. So if particular brushes that you want, make sure you find those. All right, I'm just looking at the time. Sorry, we're really getting ahead. I told you it would take a while. So let's head back to RAF. Let's get rid of these two layers. Okay, let's go back here. All right, so that's our brushes. This is our cloning tool. All right, so this is for cloning certain areas. Okay, so kind of similar to what we were doing before, but it's basically going to clone an area exact. So if I hit the Alt key and I select here, and then I'll increase that so you can see it uses that to paint. All right, and notice that's trying to blend in that color as well. All right, so you can change your mode from, I had to luminosity, I'll leave it on normal. So now if I Alt, select RAF, so I'm starting to paint by using RAF as my reference. Okay, so it's kind of like duplicating something, but moving it in a different area. Okay, so I guess where you would want to use this is, again, maybe you've got a big part of a missing building or something you want to add. You can probably use a reference from somewhere else and put it in over there as well. So that's your clone tool. Then we have, we probably don't really need to worry about the history brush tool. Eraser, I guess that's pretty self-explanatory, right? We have our eraser tool, so that's for rubbing stuff out, okay? So I click on that, and then I can rub out stuff, okay? Oops, my blend modes, let's go back eraser. Okay, so I'm just kind of rubbing that layer out, and there's nothing behind there, which is why it's white. If I went into this layer and I rub that out, you can see the layer below it. Okay, so there's our eraser tool. Paint bucket was pretty, again, self-explanatory. That just fills in an area with a color. So if I do a selection box there first, I'll do a new layer, and then I'm going to change this to yellow, and I'll get my paint bucket tool. It's going to fill that in. Okay, or if I actually do it on a layer, so if I go into a layer, make sure my selection is gone, go back to my paint bucket, and I select a color, it's going to try and fill in that color with yellow as well. Okay, cool. Paint bucket. Smudge is pretty easy. I keep destroying these images. Let me open this again and keep working on a few more things. So let's go back. Poor Raph. Let's go to Photoshop again. All right. So your smudge tool, okay, is going to do that. So if I have it on smudge, which I have there, and bring your brush. Remember when you are using these, it's going to use the brush you selected. So I'm going to bring that back to my default brush. Okay, and oops. And I'm just going to go into smudge. I want my smudge to be on. I don't want it to be on that. I just want it to be on that. Okay. So now what I can do is, you can see there, I can smudge that image. Now, that's pretty harsh. So let me just bring that strength all the way down. Okay. So I can start to smudge your images out. Okay. So it's just kind of applying a smudge and pulling that down. Now again, the reasons why you want to use this, maybe there's some blending you want to do. Maybe you want to kind of like smudge out some details. Personally, I try to avoid it because it can make the image look a bit bad. But maybe you needed to, I don't know, maybe there's something over here. You kind of wanted to kind of blend it in. You had two images that were close to each other and you want to kind of blend those together. You can kind of do that with smudge. Okay. The other thing we have down here is your blur tool. Probably more important in some cases. So your blur tool is going to do that. It's going to blur your layers. Now it's already blurred, so you can't really see much of a difference there. But if we go in here and start to blur him out, okay. So again, maybe you need to kind of blur out, I don't know, some work, some addresses. Like maybe I want to blur that out. You know, I don't want to have that address there. You could use a blur tool, something like that. I would actually just use the clone tool. So if I wanted to get rid of that address, I didn't want anyone to see it, I would just do this, bring that down a bit, just kind of like get rid of that address like that. But yeah, so there's your blur tool. So that's smudge and blur. This one down here, we have, if we go down here, we have burn and dodge. I used this yesterday actually. So burn and dodge is it darkens or lightens what's there. So here's my burn tool, and what it's doing is it's just darkening that color. Okay, as I go over it, and if I do multiple levels of that, it gets darker and darker and darker and darker. And my dodge tool highlights certain areas. So it's just bringing a color up. So the only reason you would use that, I use it quite a lot when I'm creating, say, text, or when I'm actually creating shapes and I want to give them a bit of depth and look like they're under something or over something. I'd use the the dodge and burn tool to kind of give that effect. All right, we're nearly wrapping up. So then obviously your pen tool. So this is very much something that you'll get from Illustrator. This is an Illustrator holdover. This allows you to create shapes with anchor points and paths. So if you don't know what they are, watch our Illustrator episode. So I'll show you what I mean. So let's just say I wanted to select those glasses exactly. All right, I'll just select that one there. I've closed that shape. Okay, I'm just going to go Shift C. Oops, actually, I'm using my wrong shortcuts. So I'll head back to my pen tool. Okay, and I'm going to convert these different anchor points. I'll zoom in so you can see. This is probably hard to see. So you can see now I'm creating this kind of line here. So this is what we were doing in Illustrator the other day. So I've got a bit more control over my selection because I'm actually kind of like changing the anchor points. So if you wanted to select something very specific in an image, like you wanted to copy and paste it out, you would use this. Okay, let's just go back to that. That'll get rid of a point. Or I might just select it. I can kind of move those points as well. So I could double click all the way to move it. I notice when I'm focusing, I whisper a bit. Sorry about that. I'm guessing I should keep talking. Yeah, whenever I start to really concentrate, I find I talk really softly. So sorry. Okay, I'll talk loud. So yeah, so you can see I'm starting to kind of make a better selection. I'm trying to get that really perfect. This would be very hard to do with that Lasso tool, and also very hard to do freehand. So by using the pen tool, it allows you to do that really easily. All right, cool. So there we go there. And then what we can do is we can right click that and I can make it a selection. Okay, oops, it's over here. I can choose to have a radius, like a feather radius. So that means like a blur out, or I can keep it strong. So if I do 0, there we go there, it's selected that, right? Or if I do that feather radius, so make that a selection, I'll give it, say, 25. No luck, 25 pixels. You probably won't see this, but if I copy that, go File, New, paste it, there we go there. So you can see that feather, so basically 25 pixels worth of fall off. So you may not want that. If we wanted to have it harsher, if we go back, I will undo. Sorry, Control Z. There we go. And I will right click, make selection. I'll have 0 pixels feathered, and I will copy that, and I'll paste that. And you can see there I got a sharper selection. So that's why you'd use a pen tool, to do some really specific selection of parts in your image. Okay, we're nearly done. All right, then after here, we'll go down here. Oh, so this is our selection tool as well. So this is for selecting things, direct and path selection. So when you create those points, when you want to select certain elements of them, you use these tools here. So path will select the entire circle. Direct selection will select individual nodes or anchor points in that circle. Okay. Finally down here we have our shape tool for creating shapes. Pretty easy. We don't need to talk about that. And then down here we have our hand tool to kind of like move stuff around, and our zoom tool to zoom in and out. Now this is where our shortcuts are super important. Okay, so let me go back here. You'll notice I have been kind of using them all the time. So with Photoshop, one thing you really want to do is kind of learn some of the shortcuts as quick as you can, and you'll learn them by using it, because you don't want to, if I want to move this image here, okay, and I want to work on a different part of it, I don't want to have to go down here, click the hand, move it across, and then go back. You don't want to do that. So if I just hold space, there's my move tool. Okay, so if I go back to my paintbrush by pressing B, sorry, I can draw. And if I want to move, I hold space, draw, move, hold space, and draw. Right. So you want to be using those shortcut keys as much as you can. So space is for move. Zoom in and zoom out is Control plus, Control minus, Control Z, Control V, copy and paste, those kind of things as well. So once you kind of remember those, you'll be okay. Text tool, pretty easy. We have our text ready to go. Text is transformable, so I can select it and I can free transform. So if you hold shift, so this is kind of the opposite now. If you hold shift, it's non-conforming transform. So you can switch it around. If you let go of shift, by default it'll be locked. So it'll transform. So you can see up here, it's locked together. So it's transforming where you want it to go. So there's our text. So we can put our text over here. And again, that's where those blending options are really helpful. I'm going to sneeze. Excuse me. Where those blending options are really helpful with your text. So I can go in here. And I can do a drop shadow on my text. It's all the way over there. So let's move that drop shadow. Bring it back. We'll make it, bring the size down. There we go. So you can start to do things like this with your text. Again, so these are really helpful tools for your newsletter to kind of make some things stand out. I'm just going to use a bit of a drop shadow. I'm going to do a bit of a bevel and emboss on that text as well. I might soften that. There we go. All right. Bring the size up a little bit. So things like this can really kind of make a difference to your, I guess, your school images, right? Like it looks a bit nicer. There you go. So we can start to play with that kind of stuff as well. Kind of makes it look a little bit more important on the page. And we'll zoom out. All right, so that's nearly it for today's intro lesson. There are a bunch of other things, obviously. I haven't even talked about using some of the machine learning tools. So you can do things like I can select certain elements of this and it will actually kind of upload the image to the cloud and a bunch of computers will look at it and it'll kind of automatically remove stuff, which is very cool. But I might do a lesson just on that because that's cool stuff. Anyway, so before we close up, let's do our save. All right, let's try and save this image. Now you can save it in two ways. So if I go File, Save. Okay, by default here, it's going to save now a PSD file, so a Photoshop file. So what that's going to do is that's going to save all of our layers. It's going to save the image that's in there. If we have 100 layers in here, some of them are hidden, some of them aren't, it'll save everything. So everything is saved within that file. So that file will start to get quite large. So if I had several photos and several layers and effects, that's all saved. And that's important because that means you can go back and make changes. I can go back and change the layer. For instance, if I want to go, oh, I don't want that text there, I want it somewhere else, I'll move it over here. Okay, I can do that by saving the Photoshop file. I can make changes. But if you go File, Save As, and choose anything but that, so let's just say I use a JPEG, what it'll do, and it'll shout at you and tell you, is it will go to save that. Okay, yeah, sure. What that will do is, if I go over here, that will flatten everything out. Okay, so that will flatten all of this image and make it, so you can see there, make it one image. So you're going to lose the ability to do any kind of changes. The layers are flattened, everything's flattened. So if I open this JPEG up again, I won't be able to move that. I won't be able to get rid of that yellow line. The stuff under that yellow line is now gone because everything's kind of like smushed and flattened together. So I'll cancel that. So again, that's really important with your saving. Always save your Photoshop file so you can go back and make changes and edits and move stuff around. But if you want to just give the image to somebody else, so you want to give it to the printers, you want to give it to someone to actually make a copy of it, you want to email it around, that's where you want to give them a JPEG version of it, because they probably won't have Photoshop and they don't want to open it up right with Photoshop. So you can just go save as, but I would use export, and then I would do export save for web, and then here you can choose what kind of options you want. So you can bring it down to high. Is it going to be a high quality image? Okay, and we can see how big it's going to be. We don't want to bring it down. Why is it a GIF? It should be. Doesn't look like it's updating. Yeah, I had this issue before where this wasn't actually updating to what the image actually was. So by default, this should tell you the size of the image and also how big it's going to take and how long it's going to take to download. But I noticed that my Photoshop's been playing up a little bit at the moment and it hasn't been updating that. There we go, that's better. So I'll switch across now. There we go. So now you can see it's going to save it as a JPEG, a high JPEG, and it's going to be about a meg. If I bring it down to low, there we go. So it's gone from a meg to 330 kilobytes. I don't know if you saw much of a difference in the change there. You can see here, we'll see it with the start. If we go up here, so if we go from low to very high, give it a sec, there you go. So you can see how clean that looks, okay? But the image is 3.3 meg, so it's a lot bigger. If we go to medium, or even high, look at that. So that's gone down to, what, it's only a meg from 3 megs. You can start to see some artifacting coming in. So again, this allows you to go back in and make some changes to the size. I can also make the size smaller, but also basically the quality of the image. And you can see instantly how much space it's going to take up. What this is telling you how long it's going to take to download on a normal connection. So let's just go back to 1998 and do a 56K modem, right? So that's going to take 184 seconds to download that image on a 56K modem. On low, it's going to take 61 seconds, okay? But, you know, our internet speeds, I don't know what your speeds at school, you know, they're probably pretty high. Let's just say they're 2 megasecond, right? So there we go. It's still going to take 3 seconds to download that image. So that's really helpful. Okay, you can see those kind of things. You can also change it from a JPEG to a GIF if you want to, depending on what you're doing. You can do animated GIFs. We haven't even talked about animation. You can do animation in Photoshop. But anyway, that's how you save. And then that is the image that you email or give along to whoever you want to use it. So there you go. I'll wrap it up there. So that's Photoshop, introduction to Photoshop. So like I said, there is a ton you can do. And I've only just scratched the surface, okay? And we might look at maybe a more, you know, in-depth lesson a little bit later. So after we do these next 2 weeks of Intro 2s, if people want to, we can do some more in-depth. Maybe we'll put a survey out there. I know everyone loves surveys. To maybe pick which sessions they want us to then do a more in-depth session on. I think that might be a good idea. Okay, so that's it for me. I'm going to end the stream there. So go and have a bit of play in Photoshop. I'm sure you're all now going to get photos and do everyone's faces up, make them look beautiful, because you can. Gets rid of wrinkles as well, actually. I didn't show that. I should have found a picture of a wrinkly person. I'll put myself up there later. So yeah, that's it for me. Have a good time at that. Have a play. Tomorrow's session is all on Autodesk Inventor. In fact, I'm going to make the Autodesk Inventor video live in about 2 minutes. So you'll be able to watch it tonight. So if you jump on the Bendigo Tech School website, you'll be able to see it and watch that one. So that masterclass is pre-recorded by the wonderful Matt, and it's all about using Autodesk Inventor, and I'll watch that myself because I don't know how to use it. So enjoy, watch that. It'll be live after I finish this video. I'm going to make this video live as well for those that didn't register. It'll be live in about 2 minutes, so you can watch the playback, and I'll make Matt's Inventor video for tomorrow live now, so you can watch it and get a head start on everybody else. So thank you very much. I'm going to end the stream. No questions. No, everyone's quiet.